Meet Chad. 3 weeks ago, Chad was the guy who organized the Sunday football game, replied to every message in the group chat, and genuinely looked forward to his morning coffee. Then something shifted, so slowly that even Chad didn't notice the first domino fall. First, the coffee stopped tasting like anything. The football games kept happening. Chad just quietly stopped showing up. He started sleeping 10 hours a night and waking up exhausted, as if sleep had simply stopped doing its job. His phone buzzed with invitations all weekend. It stayed face down on the table. Meanwhile, his brain refused to switch off, looping the same worries at 3 in the morning, replaying old conversations, hunting for what he did wrong. Food felt like a chore, friends felt like effort, and the future felt like a blank wall. Chad is not lazy, and Chad is not weak. Chad is depressed. And here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. The machinery doing all of this to Chad may be one of the oldest survival tools your entire species owns. Because what's happening to Chad is not rare. Around 280 million people are living with depression right now, roughly 1 in 20 adults on Earth, which raises a deeply strange evolutionary question. Natural selection is ruthless about cutting anything that wastes energy or lowers your odds of surviving and reproducing. So how did a condition that makes you stop eating, stop competing, and stop showing up survive millions of years of that filter? Here's the first clue. In about 1 in 5 cases, depression arrives with no triggering disaster at all. No breakup, no job loss, nothing. The switch just flips. That persistence is exactly what you'd expect if some of Chad's symptoms aren't the malfunction, if they're an ancient program, running beautifully, just in the wrong century. Take the 3 a.m. looping. Evolutionary psychologists Paul Andrews and Anderson Thompson called this the analytical rumination hypothesis. Their argument is that the relentless rumination is not noise, it's a spotlight. The depressed brain ramps up activity in a region called the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, the part that does slow, effortful, analytical thinking. And every other symptom starts to look like support for that spotlight. Losing pleasure in food and football strips away distractions. Pulling back from friends frees up attention. Even the extra REM sleep helps lock in memories of the problem. There's even a serotonin receptor, the 5-HT1A receptor, that helps keep those neurons fueled and firing long enough to keep grinding on the problem. In our ancestral past, the hardest problems were rarely physical. They were social. A betrayal, a collapsing alliance, a debt you couldn't repay. Exactly the kind of tangled problem worth shutting out the world to solve. And here's the kicker. Studies suggest depressed people really are, on average, better at certain complex social reasoning tasks. The grinding sometimes works, but rumination is only one theory, and it doesn't explain Chad's other big move, the retreat. For that, there's the social rank hypothesis. Picture 2 of our ancestors locked in a status contest, and one of them is clearly losing. Fighting on means injury, or being driven out of the group entirely, which on the ancient savannah was close to a death sentence. So, evolution may have built an off switch. Low mood and withdrawal act as a signal. I yield, I'm no longer a threat. It de-escalates the fight, protects the loser from harm, and keeps the whole group stable. Researchers call it the involuntary defeat strategy. In that light, Chad pulling away from the group chat isn't random. It's an ancient script for backing down gracefully. And there's a third theory that might be the most unexpected of all, linking depression not to your social world, but to your immune system. It's called the pathogen host defense hypothesis. In a world before antibiotics, an infected wound was one of the most likely ways to die. When your body fights infection, it floods the bloodstream with inflammatory signals called cytokines, and those same signals act on the brain to produce what scientists literally call sickness behavior, fatigue, withdrawal, loss of appetite. Notice anything? That list is almost identical to Chad's, and the overlap may be the point. Shutting down conserved energy for the immune fight and crawling away from the group stopped you infecting the people you loved. Even today, depression and inflammation travel together, and the stresses that ancestrally meant wounds and infection can still trip the same ancient alarm. So which theory is right? Probably, in a sense, all of them. Depression looks less like one disease and more like several overlapping ancient programs, each tuned for a different threat, and they share one logic. In a dangerous, resource-scarce, infection-heavy world, a temporary state that made you stop, conserve, retreat, and think hard could genuinely keep you alive. But notice that word, temporary. Every one of these programs was built to switch off. The wound healed, the status fight resolved, the problem got solved, and the system stood down. That's the real mismatch. Chat's triggers don't heal and don't resolve. A relentless inbox, an abstract worry about the future, a problem with no clean solution. The Savannah alarm gets stuck in the on position, an ancient tool for surviving a short, sharp crisis, firing endlessly in a world it was never designed for. But here is the genuinely good news, and it changes everything. We are no longer stuck with that ancient switch. Modern antidepressants like SSRIs raise serotonin within days, but the real lift usually takes weeks because the payoff is downstream. The brain grows new connections, boosts a protein called BDNF, and sprouts fresh neurons in the hippocampus, physically rewiring itself toward flexibility. Therapy retrains the loop, and even exercise drives the same regrowth. So if any of this sounded like you or like someone you love, please hear this clearly. It is not a character flaw and not a life sentence. It is a common, treatable condition, and reaching out to a doctor or a therapist is one of the strongest, smartest things a person can do.